Welcome everyone, Costin here with a discussion about demons in Total War Warhammer 3 and the community tier list. You voted and here are the results. The single worst campaign for any demonic campaign is, of course, Daniel, the Demon Prince. I really don't know what Creative Assembly was thinking about this, but let's just consider something. The Demon Prince uses undivided corruption, but the problem is when he takes over a settlement, he has to dedicate it to a god, which means that that particular settlement is going to start generating, say, Nurgle corruption, which, yes, it will cause problems in your campaign. Technically, you can argue that, well, you can get the Sinnelleos benefits, the Siege benefits, the Khorne benefits, and all that, but that's not really how corruption works. This idea of having all kinds of different corruption in a province just doesn't really hold up, given the context of the game. I mean, I guess you can manage it, but in reality, you just end up being far, far weaker. Now, furthermore, when we're considering Daniel, he doesn't have a research tree. Instead, he gets various benefits over here by getting glory for various gods. It should be pointed out that Undivided is ultimately the best one, at least once you dedicate yourself to Undivided, because you do get significant benefits with that. But hey, you want to unlock units? Gotta get glory. You want to unlock various benefits with these gods? Gotta get glory. Which just really ends up being a pretty weak situation over here for Daniel to deal with, because you're constantly splitting your attention between various gods. It might be best to just focus on one god or another, but still, just not a great situation. And besides, you actually want to diversify, because in order to increase your hero capacity, you do need various elements of different gods, because that's the way you increase hero capacity. Specifically, if you want to increase Plague Ridden capacity, you need a settlement for Nurgle, get to tier 3. Now, another problem with his settlements is Daniel has a really bad economy, and in order to make up for that, you may want to sack settlements. The problem is, when you sack settlements, you can't gain glory. When you gain glory, you can't get money. Furthermore, just the last point, I'm not going to waste too much time on this guy, his skill line is actually quite freaking awful. He gets various benefits for different types of demonic units, but in reality, these benefits, like, if you have a generic character, they might be better. Also, most other characters, the vast majority of other characters in the game, minus 1 or 2, but even in that case, can get things like, oh, I can get campaign movement range very quickly in a campaign. I can get Inspiring Presence for the XP benefit. For Daniel, you have to spend a lot of points to get stuff that is fairly basic in your campaign. It can work, but geez, I really don't know what Creative Assembly was thinking in this campaign, on an execution level at the very least. In the second worst spot, it is Epidemius of Nurgle, the free LC campaign that Creative Assembly released alongside Thrones of Decay, and isn't particularly great. Oh, you get Plaguefish Poppies cycle time. That's great. You got Plague Bearers and Exalted Plague Bearers recruit rank, which doesn't really matter all that much because Warriors of Chaos are just flat out better units to recruit. In fact, there's plenty of other better units. I guess if you don't own any Nurgle DLC or Warriors of Chaos DLC, fair enough, Champions of Chaos, but still. Oh, you get campaign movement range for Plague Cultists to spread your plagues even further. Could be a bit decent, doesn't quite matter as much. Basically, his campaign benefits don't really amount to much, as well as the top bar over here in terms of spreading plagues is so difficult to spread that many plagues that you're realistically never going to get a full-on epidemical. And even if you could, let me just say this, the fact that you're spending the same resource to build plagues as you are for military production means that you're just encouraged really to focus on military production. It is an issue in general in Nurgle campaigns at the moment. It is why Festus is technically the best Nurgle campaign, because, yeah, you don't have to spend infections to get military buildings. But ultimately, it really hurts Epidemius because the entire point of his campaign is nullified with that. Like, I guess if you're playing with very limited armies, it wouldn't matter that much, but you're playing with a lot of armies, and that's kind of like the meta of Warhammer 3. Like, would you rather get another stack of Chosen of Nurgle, or would you rather get a couple of Plagues? Just for a 50% research rate, especially given, like, quite a bit of Nurgle research is relatively fast, all things considered. Like, you know, you consider the fact, like, individual research is relatively fast given the Nurgle research rework. I mean, certainly some things can take time, but still, point is, even 50% research for all the effort it requires is not really great. Oh, you get an army ability. That's fantastic. But it only applies to him. So, again, we have only effects that work with that. On the flip side, Epidemius is certainly worth confederating in a Nurgle campaign, purely because he gets pox seedling. So whenever he takes a province, he gets population surplus. This is actually fairly significant. He does get various benefits for demonic units, as well as reducing the cost to create a plague, so that's useful. But yeah, not worth playing, worth more confederating, which you might be able to pull off from a distance given Nurgle cults. So I would not recommend playing this campaign. I'd recommend confederating this Legendary Lord when you're playing the other two Nurgle campaigns. In the third worst campaign for demons, we of course have the Changeling. To be honest, I consider this campaign one of the worst campaigns in the history of Total War. I mean, Daniel is certainly garbage, don't get me wrong on that, and I don't think highly of Epidemius, but the Changeling is a particular brand of terrible. I mean, he's very strong, undeniably so. He can steamroll the campaign, but that's kind of the problem. Like, without any kind of opposition, without any kind of level of challenge in your campaign, it ends up being very boring very quickly. Certainly, he does have a good amount of quest battles that you can do through the schemes, and those could be fun once, twice, like, oh, let's go to Grand Cafe and blow up the Great Bastion. Let's do X, Y, and Z. That's all well and good. The problem is, you do this once, you've seen it all, there's no reason to do it. Especially because unlocking all these battles requires you to do such tedious stuff that is not challenging at all, in any way, shape, or form. Like, oh, let me waste my time winning 12 battles against the dwarves. Let me win 15 land battles in the Empire in a game where the vast majority of battles will take place in settlements. That's fun. Let me destroy Festus. Okay, that's a bit more decent. But point is, a lot of this stuff is just very, very tedious, very grinding, not interesting at all. And how they make a campaign who's about a character who's supposed to be a troll, who is very powerful, how they make it boring is a bit astounding, really. It comes down to this campaign not really respecting the fundamentals of gameplay of what makes a campaign good in Total War, like having some level of challenge, having something to really sink your teeth into, having risk, having actual risk in your campaign as opposed to no risk at all. And on top of that, all these schemes that you're unleashing, like, they might sound great, but they also end up meaningless. Like the Greenskin Rebellion over here that happens in the Darklands that you put a lot of effort to unlock is just finished in one turn once you do it. And that is certainly a problem. Or, oh, let's take Norsca and teleport. Like, that's actually more interesting because you actually are teleporting the major Norscan faction, so do it in Wolf 1 or Cafe. But so many things end up being completely and utterly meaningless because they just don't amount to much. Like, you might think, oh, we can teleport the Black Pyramid of Nagash and get some really powerful armies, but again, they get defeated in 1-2 turns flat by the AI faction. So, like, that's the thing. Like, if the changeling actions on the campaign map were done in a better way, if they didn't require a lot of boring grinding, and if they actually had major impact, which they don't, that would be better, but they're just over like 1-2 turns, almost all of them, except the Norsca situation. And let me just say this, putting Norsca against Cafe, I know who's going to win that particular fight, suffice to say. And it won't be Norsca. So that's kind of like the problem over here. Like, you're supposed to cause chaos, but you end up just being more of an annoyance more than anything else. The Changeling and the lore had actual impact, significant impact. on the end times, for instance. You just feel like a nuisance. And in point of fact, that's probably the best way of describing the Changeling. He's a nuisance. He's not really a great campaign in any way. He's not really a great Legendary Lord to play or to even play against. He's just like if you play against him, he has one army you defeated, and that's basically a threat dealt with, more or less. And it's gonna be a bad army because he's just gonna recruit a bunch of like blue horrors and cast Furies of Siege. Yeah, real challenge right there, boys and girls. Then we have Kairos Fateweaver. Don't shoot the messenger on this one. You guys voted for this, and yeah, Kairos just doesn't really have a great campaign. He never has had a great campaign. Having a battle reinforcement time benefit and a hero action success chance sounds horrible, and it actually is pretty damn pointless in the vast majority of situations. There are some cases where it could be good, but here's the thing. Siege does not suffer from weak armies. In fact, Siege has very powerful armies. It's everything else, be it replenishment issues, though those have been improved with certain changes from Shadows of Change, because the horrors now give you replenishment. But there's a weird relationship between casualty replenishment and Siege, so you end up actually fighting a lot more battles manually than you would ever need to, just because, due to the barrier, I believe, you end up not being able to replenish casualties as easily. Now, Kairos is supposed to be this powerful mage, and he is certainly powerful, but yeah, it just ends up feeling pretty boring as dirt in a lot of ways, in a significant number of ways. And I do think it is a shame that when you think about the Blue Scribes, they're actually better mages or more interesting mages to use than Kairos, because with Kairos you have to pick and choose. Okay, am I going to get certain lores of magic, as opposed to being able to use all of them at once in a battle, which is what the Blue Scribes do. So he's a bit of a disappointment in that respect. And also the changing of ways. One, having to unlock it through research, which takes time, is less interesting. It's not particularly great. And then on top of that, a lot of these mechanics do end up feeling very gimmicky. I feel like a Siege campaign should be dynamic. That's the problem with the Changeling, because like it's not dynamic. The things you do in a Changeling campaign, there's a bit of dynamic aspects to it, but it doesn't really matter all that much. Oh, I spawned some rogue armies. I think you should be looking to manipulate factions, control factions, really screw them over in diplomacy, etc., etc. But believe it or not, that's not what you're doing in this campaign, or the Changeling campaigns, as much as you might think. So it ends up being falling flat from my personal perspective. Also, really boring playstyle. Like, you can go with mass range if you want to, but really the best thing you can do is go for freaking Forsaken and Sangors, and then Chaos Warriors and Chosen. Yay, that's a lot of fun. You'll defeat everyone, but yeah, you have limited economy as well, which isn't great. You can at least get a really powerful economy, but it requires you building a lot of these income from all buildings in the local province, in a particular province, to get that income. So, just not overall a great situation to be dealing with. Then we have Kugaf. To be honest, I think like his rework, so to speak, in a campaign, focusing more on Blessed Symptoms than just on getting Nurglings done, is a significant benefit, as well as the benefits that Nurgle has inherently gotten with the new patch. He has a good skill line, even if, you know, the upkeep and benefits for Nurglings are just pretty meaningless. I mean, just don't bother recruiting them, they're not worth it. But there are other significant benefits, like Plague Ridden in all provinces, hero capacity for Plague Riddens, chances plague spreading, infection cost to create the plague, as well as various other benefits that you do have access to. I think he's actually in an okay spot. It's not my favorite campaign in the game, but like compared to the pure misery that Kugaf was dealing with before, yeah, this is genuinely a significant improvement compared to where we were before in the game. So yeah, CA did improve things compared to where they were before. I would say the one downside that he does have in this campaign, he starts with too many damn ports in his campaign from the very beginning. So that does limit how many structures you can get, but like really, he's okay. Just that's about it. I mean, he's still probably hard countered by Gorst in some ways, and the mountain situation and climate isn't particularly great, but hey, at least you can make it work this time around without it being pure freaking misery. Which is not something I can say for some other campaigns that I've already talked about on this particular list. So yeah, Kugaf does feel better. He's actually quite strong in battle himself. Like in skirmish, he's one of the best, if not the best duelist that you do have access to in the game. So yeah, Kugaf just works in quite a few ways. Just not particularly exciting either. Moving on to some of the better campaigns, we get N'Kari in third place. N'Kari's campaign mechanics are actually interesting, at least on paper. You can subjugate other factions, you can vassalize other factions, you can manipulate other factions, you can get cults spread around the world, so you can really achieve a great deal of power from a global perspective. So that is all well and fun, I would certainly say, about N'Kari. N'Kari certainly is a master of diplomacy in a game in quite a lot of ways, though I would dare say that I would probably prefer using Azazel if I wanted to go for that particular playstyle. The problem for N'Kari is really down to the fact that, yeah, starting in Ulthuan is a bit of a harsh beginning. That said, dealing with all of Ulthuan in the early game can certainly be really fun and interesting because it is challenging. If only the rest of the campaign presented this kind of level of challenge, but unfortunately it does not. Basically, once you vassalize all of Ulthuan, which will grant you significant power, the rest of the campaign is a cakewalk. And not really in a good way. Like, the Warriors of Chaos have a similar issue, but the problem for N'Kari is your casualty replenishment is so horrible that, again, you end up fighting a lot of battles that you could easily win manually. Especially bad because a lot of the Slaanesh units, if you don't own the Champions of Chaos DLC, are glass cannon units that will just take significant losses and auto-resolve. You can make this campaign work. It won't be pure misery, which is not something I can say about Kairos or the Changeling, but it does certainly have its limitations. I really think Slaanesh needs a rework similar to one Nurgle got, and hopefully at one point we will get it, as opposed to just a free campaign with the Kala if the leaks are to be believed. Or who knows, maybe Creative Assembly will rework Slaanesh with that. I think the problem, though, beyond like casualty replenishment issues or inherent demonic issues in the game, or auto-resolve issues, the problem with this kind of campaign is it's fun initially to, play the diplomacy game, to subjugate factions, all that, but then you realize that once you've subjugated them, well, they're really powerful and they'll just steamroll the campaign for you. So you end up having a campaign which feels frustrating and boring in the long term, though really fun early on. I gotta stress this out. Like, it's actually really fun and interesting early on in a campaign, but not so great necessarily in the long term, just because, yeah, Tyrion, Elfarion, and Alariel combined with maybe a couple of minor factions as vassals just obliterate everything in their path. But still, lots of possibilities. And I would dare say that you're playing more of a siege campaign than actual siege campaigns, because you're manipulating factions, you're playing that diplomacy game, you're looking to try and convince factions to engage in diplomacy with you because you're going to get your hooks in them and use seductive influence. Like, really, when we're talking about manipulation of chaos, this is really the campaign that does achieve that really sells this idea of the corrupting influence of chaos. And of the manipulation of chaos. So consider it more like as opposed to just a pure Slaanesh campaign, consider it a Slaaneshi campaign, but also with a good amount of Tzeentch in it, more so than the actual Tzeentchian campaigns. That's where I stand on this. Then at number 2, it is Skarbrand Exiled, at least according to your votes. Personally, I don't particularly like this campaign, and it is quite a shame. One of my favorite campaigns in Warhammer 2 was actually Tarax when he came out. So for me, Skarbrand, when Warhammer 3 came out, was, well, let's just say he felt like a major disappointment in quite a lot of ways. To explain why that is, when you look at Tarax's campaign, yes, you can steamroll across the map very quickly, but on top of that, you do have a variety of units, variety of heroes, variety of recruitment in general, multiple armies. And so his campaign, even now, feels a lot more interesting. Whereas with Skarbrand, you just have one army and the freaking Blood Hosts, which, to be quite honest on that subject, is just not necessarily the most compelling experience in the world from my personal perspective. Also, funnily enough, you can get really good armies in auto-resolve, and you have insane level of casualty replenishment even without a hero for that, because yes, bloodletting will give you that level of power. But at the same time, it just feels like a very one-dimensional campaign. Now let me say this, the best campaigns in the game are campaigns where you do have a more dynamic experience, where you can make multiple choices and those choices work. That is not quite the experience that you're gonna get in a Scarbrand campaign. It's always gonna be smash and burn everything in your path, and then that over there, smash and burn everything in your path, and then yeah, just move on. My issue with this particular playstyle is that it just feels very one-dimensional. Like, you're never gonna want to play a Scarbrand campaign in any different way. Like, say what you will about Nakari, say what you will about other campaigns, you can play it multiple different ways, and it can certainly feel very interesting when you do so. Whereas Scarbrand, yeah, just smash and burn, and go all the way to Ulfwan to beat the crap out of Nakari for your long campaign victory condition. Though, it is probably a difference because I do play a lot of campaigns multiple times, a lot, whereas I know most people, you know, they'll play a couple of campaigns here and there, they'll only play a couple of races, so that's probably why there's that difference of opinion. And also, you know, if you're a new player and you just want a campaign where it's going to be an easy ride and you don't have to worry about maybe the complexities of diplomacy and anything like that, then yeah, I imagine this campaign is great for that purpose. Just not my favorite campaign for a wide variety of reasons. Anyway, moving on to number 1, which is exactly the opposite in quite a few ways. And then finally at number 1, according to your votes, not my opinion, but according to your votes, is Tamarkan the Maga Lord. People have made the argument that he feels more like the Everchosen than the actual Everchosen is. And what I really like in this campaign personally is, despite the issues of Nurgle, like say climate, the issues with economy, needing to use infections for both military construction and plagues, what I really like about this particular campaign is just the sheer number of choices that you end up having in this particular campaign. Let me explain. So you start fairly simple with the province with just 2 settlements, right? In the Gallows Tree, and you're at war with the Dolgan, who are going to be very quickly becoming Kolek's vassals. And you also start at war with Kolek, so you can really manipulate some of the things here in your favor to get even more power. But what's really great about this campaign is the sheer variety that you get with these chieftains, because they have different units, they have different effects. While it can feel grindy to a certain extent to deal with this, to unlock their full abilities, there's a lot of quest battles, including some of the best quest battles in the game. Like the quest battle he has for his item at the Gates of Nuln is a really fun and interesting one, but you get a lot more fun because, yeah, a lot of variety because of the units that you can unlock and the various chieftains. What's also great about these chieftains is just the sheer amount of hilarious conflict that gets caused between them. Like, Kaisk apparently, the guy who has no mouth, apparently can talk quite a bit and talk a lot of shit about a lot of other people. And you gotta balance it out, like, who do you want fealty with? Which effect do you want to go for? Do you want to please Papa Nurgle, or do you care more about the fealty with a particular chieftain for the power that gives you? So it ends up being a really fun and interesting campaign. I admit Nurgle is not my favorite race, but I understand perfectly well why this got voted as the number 1 campaign, the demonic campaign in the game as it currently is. Because, yeah, really fun experience over here with those chieftains, the units they can provide you, lots of variety, lots of choices that you can make in this campaign. And while you don't have the same diplomatic power as other demonic campaigns, because, yeah, your barracks take a long time to build up, it is at least viable to vassalize other factions, including Mr. Grimgore. So imagine being, like, while your victory condition does require you to destroy it, I would say ignore that, play the campaign, vassalize Grimgore, and steamroll the freaking world. Because Grimgore, Very powerful AI faction. Grimgor as your vassal when you deal with Kolic, who's possibly one of his principal threats. Yeah, that's a steamroll of epic proportions. So you might end up being like faction strength rank 10 and Grimgor is rank 1 and he's following you. It really feels like a great campaign experience from that perspective. Really amusing from that particular perspective as well to deal with this campaign. Like, I really certainly like the dynamic relationship between the chieftains that you do have and the various actions you can take. Like, I think like it does get a bit tedious to be certain, but yeah, I think of the demonic campaigns, like CA did a really good job with this one. Though I would argue, like, if you're looking for a short campaign, Akari is better. Scarbrand is a single-minded focus, and yeah, Tamarkan has a lot of potential, really fun potential as well.